Welcome to Utah Stories. The Wasatch Front Regional Council was flooded with residents showing their anger and opposition against the gondola proposal up Little Cottonwood Canyon. Will they listen to the people, or will their elitist vision of a massive gondola up our Wasatch Wilderness win? Our second story is about the Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall's State of the City address. She gave herself an A. Does it feel like to you Salt Lake City leaders deserve an A? The largest homeless population in Salt Lake City we've ever seen, which isn't really her fault, she says. The most unaffordable Salt Lake City ever by far, which isn't really her fault. More people smoking meth on the street than ever before, again, not her fault. But how would you rate this mayor? We will get into this. And then finally, the biggest issues that the Utah State Legislature is considering. Big Brother invited into Utah bars, recording everything that you do, being able to download the footage to use to prosecute bar owners and you. Is this overreach, or will this save lives? Also, will school vouchers destroy public education as we know it? And the banning of transgender surgery for youth, the ban of trans athletes in schools. We'll be getting into all of the biggest stories, as well as some of your comments. But first, for those of you who are new to Utah Stories is the voice of local Utah. We represent those who are at the grassroots, independent business owners, farmers, ranchers, and urbanites. Utah Stories is grassroots local journalism for citizens, not subjects. If we go back to this reasoning behind our nation's founding, subjects are told what they must believe, what they can say, how they can say it. Before the American Revolution, everyone here was a British subject bending the knee to the king. It seems in many ways the elites again are telling us what we can believe and what we can say, and silencing those who don't comply. We strongly oppose this trend. It is the First Amendment that makes us Americans. It needs to be preserved. They want us to believe that it is the Democrats who are evil, the Republicans are evil. This is a smokescreen. It's the elites who want to divide our country, so we ignore their attempts to silence us, take away our freedoms, and undermine democracy. Utah Stories' mission is to provide a voice to the voiceless. We believe the media has the power to affect positive change and make Utah a better place. If you support this mission, I strongly encourage you to smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, but subscribe to our free digital newsletter. That is the voice of local Utah. Or subscribe to our print magazine for just $3 a month. It is a great deal, and will send the voice of local Utah directly to your home every single month, and you can enjoy all of our amazing stories by our awesome team of local journalists. Dell Jones wrote this incredible story about Main Street, and you got to check it out. It's our current issue of Utah Stories, and our new February issue just went to press. It is totally awesome. I'm super happy with the job our journalists are doing right now. It's like everybody's up their game because they know we need more subscribers to continue to print the magazine. Printing costs doubled during COVID, and that is what we are calling our readers to do, especially those who love our team of awesome journalists. Okay, so let's get to the first story, which is yesterday, the Wasatch Front Regional Council opened up their doors to hear public comment on the proposal to build the gondola, the longest gondola in the world it would be, up Little Cottonwood Canyon. So what do residents think about this idea? It turns out 89% of residents strongly oppose the gondola proposal. They hate the idea, 89%. But at this Wasatch Front Regional Council meeting, you would believe that most people would want to have the gondola because those sitting on the council obviously support it by and large. 14 of them voted for the gondola to be in the plan, and just 5 of them opposed it. So who were these 5 that opposed it? Let's read from the Salt Lake or the Deseret News, who covered this story. So this is I'm surprised that not many news stations covered it that I could see, but I'm glad the Deseret News covered this. 200 people flooded the Wasatch Regional Council offices on Thursday to show their opposition. The gondola is a plan that would cost just over $1 billion. In 2023 alone, they wanted $391 million to be allocated to get this started. And the plan includes 3 phases. The first phase includes enhanced bus service, tolling the roadway, roadway modifications to Wasatch Boulevard. The second is building new snow sheds to prevent avalanches, and the third is construction of the gondola. So this $391 million is just phase 1. And board members Monica Zielinski, who's the Sandy mayor, Jenny Wilson, Salt Lake County mayor, tried to remove the gondola from the plan in a motion that ultimately failed after a 14-5 vote. The 5 votes that were in opposition were Zielinski, Wilson, West Jordan Mayor Dirk Burton, Holiday Mayor Robert Daly, and Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall. Way to go, those who opposed it, because here's what's going on here. The Wasatch Front Regional Council, they are a bunch of good old boys, elitists with their delusions of grandeur if Salt Lake City had the longest gondola in the world. This would be probably great for tourism. It would definitely mitigate some of the impact that we're seeing of congestion up the canyon. It takes up to 2 hours to get up the canyon right now. But this would impact all Utahns because all Utahns would have to pay for it, and it would only benefit the elites. Like, I don't like to ski at the Snowbird anymore. I grew up on Snowbird. I skied there from age 5 to age 25. And my grandpa was nice enough to get me a season's pass up there. I loved Snowbird until they got the high-speed quads. For me, the era of the wonderful skiing at Snowbird ended with the high-speed quads because you had to be dodging skiers all the time. And powder days turned into powder hours. And it felt like you were in a race constantly to get to the fresh tracks. And it just stopped being this like wonderful nature experience, and it turned into this like chase against the powder pigs for the powder. And I just didn't like it. And I'm not alone. A lot of people love the backcountry. A lot of people enjoy the trails. And this would be totally devastating for people who enjoy the trails. And so let's take a look at some of these pictures. Again, 89% of residents don't want it. Most of the people on the Wasatch Front Regional Council board wanted it. We had the mayor of Alta get up and speak in opposition to it. We had a whole bunch of people speak in opposition to it. Let's read a few quotes from what people had to say. So the mayor of Alta, Roger Bork, described the small town at the top of Little Cottonwood Canyon as a gem of the Wasatch. He said the project would mar the canyon and it's socially unjust. He said, and quote, "The gondola would injure that gem. It's a beautiful spot. We don't want this visual blight up there," he said, adding the vast majority of the people in the state will never get close to that gondola, but they will have to pay for it. The 2 pro-gondola speakers were Snowbird General Manager David Fields and Ski Utah President Nathan Rafferty. They were part of the Gondola Works, which is a coalition of groups, corporations, developers who have been pushing for years now to have UDOT and the public support the gondola. They've spent massive amounts of money on a PR campaign to get this done. And this is what they said. They said, quote, "This winter has demonstrated many days for the need of reliable transportation despite the weather and avalanche conditions for a growing number of winter recreationalists visiting Little Cottonwood Canyon. As we look to current traffic gridlock, delays, and hazardous conditions, I can only imagine what this would become without thoughtful planning," said Fields, pointing to the number of days that the canyon has been closed this year due to avalanche danger. After his comment, Fields was met with boos and jeers, prompting Gruber to call out, "This is a civil discussion. Please stop booing." So everybody who was there was no doubt in opposition to the plan, and it's extremely sad to see that it appears our Wasatch Front Regional Council are all basically bought off into believing that this is a great idea, or they're getting basically their paychecks on the basis of backing this horrible idea. And if this passes, I will have to say that Utah is extremely corrupt, that we have a state that doesn't support democracy. That was brought up in the discussion, that we live in a democracy. A young person brought that up, and he said if this passes, it's just a clear violation of the powered elite in our state controlling and racing us into a future that we absolutely don't want to have. So with that, as you know, my opinion, but I suggest you write to the members of the Wasatch Front Regional Council, voice your opposition, and we're hoping to have on this program a person, either Dave Fields or Lafferty, to talk about why they support it and have a debate against hopefully the mayor of Alta. We're going to try to have that scheduled for next week. So tune in for that. That would be awesome if we get that organized. Okay, and so on to our next story. We want to talk about Erin Mendenhall's State of the City address. She gave herself an A. So does it feel like to you that Salt Lake City deserves an A? I mean, it's like you go down the streets, and I don't remember ever seeing people smoking crack on every corner, but that's going on now. We have the most unaffordable housing we've ever had. It's like she kept praising herself and her administration for all the measures they'd taken to produce affordable housing. And I think you'd need to hire a detective to figure out, where is this affordable housing? I don't see it anywhere. I'm just looking around and I see only $1,200 studio apartments, $2,400 two-bedroom apartments. It's just unbelievably unaffordable, and I don't see anything major happening either on the homeless front or on the other on the front to really help the homeless. And so I'm going to start this story here. So from Woodbine Food Hall in the Granary District, Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall gave her State of the City address for the first time in person since 2020. It was nice to have such a large in-person event at a brand new place. But Mendenhall said, "I'm so proud of you and what we've done together." Mendenhall says, Our downtown has recovered better than any downtown in the nation. And the biggest stars in the NBA are playing in our backyard and will have at least a $40 million economic impact. We're going to get another very well-known winter sports event to come back in 2030 or 2034. We have the Winter Olympics coming back to Salt Lake City. And we have a new name change to the arena that represents Salt Lake City. It will be the Delta Center once again, and Salt Lake City will be Delta's workhorse city throughout 2044, she announced. The character of this city, she says, is not created through our challenges. It's revealed. The state of the city is ready. The mayor released her annual report card. She says, once again, air quality, as an air quality advocate, she's always an air quality advocate. 1 hour of operating gas-powered lawnmowers, she says, is the same as running your car for 39 miles. Last year, Mendenhall said, they swapped out 539 gas lawnmowers in the city. That program has allowed residents to swap out their lawnmower for free for electric lawnmowers. And that's very cool, great, but who paid for that? Who paid for those electric lawnmowers? Of course, it was the taxpayers. So she's telling us all that the city used our tax dollars to give people free electric lawnmowers. But does she walk down around Rio Grande area? I wonder how much all these bundles of wood that homeless advocates are giving to the homeless in order to keep warm, how much carbon emissions are those emitting? The last time I heard, the carbon emissions from burning wood are the worst carbon emissions that you can have. They have the highest level of PM 2.5s. There was a study put out by Utah Physicians for Clean Air, and they found that. And the only way homeless people can keep warm who are unsheltered is by burning wood. So doesn't that mitigate the whole impact of the free electric lawnmowers, Mrs. Mayor? And I'd love to have her on the show to talk about it if she'd come on, but right now it's not looking too promising, I'm afraid. But it's all good. But let's look at another clip. She also praised the Free Fare program. That was a program to allow people to ride tracks for free, and it will be again happening all 10 days around the All-Star game. And she's a firm believer of lead by example. We need to switch to clean, renewable sources of energy. We are going to be making an 80 megawatt solar farm in Tooele Valley, and she's excited to see the project come together as soon as possible. Clean, renewable energy will be available by then. Also, she says, Salt Lake City will become the friendliest state for clean, renewable energy. Trees are at the front lines of our fight against climate change. And again, how are we going to fight climate change if we have scores of people out and around the city smoking meth? I mean, I don't know exactly what the emissions are when so many people are smoking meth and crack, but I can't imagine it has a positive impact on climate change. So the mayor praised her $85 million park bond that was passed by voters. We'll be investing more than ever in parks. Construction of the first phase of the Glendale Park will begin this fall. At 27 in the video, the mayor says, we have not been immune to the challenges of fast-growing cities face, including crime. We are building our civilian staff that doesn't require officers. New training is bringing more de-escalation as it did across the nation. Crime peaked during COVID. Crime has been reduced by 12% since its peak. So the mayor is talking about a 12% reduction in crime. But as the newspapers and other news outlets have pointed out, the response time of Salt Lake City Police Department is really high. It's 10 minutes if you call 911 currently right now. And that is not getting reduced significantly fast enough because they're not able to hire enough police officers. The mayor pointed out that they had hired about half of the officers they needed. They needed about 90 officers about 9 months ago. They've hired about 45, but there are still not enough officers because we've seen such an escalation in incidences and crime in Salt Lake City. The ballpark neighborhood, we pointed out in a previous episode, saw a massive increase in murders. There was 9 murders around the ballpark neighborhood, and as we learned, the Salt Lake City Bees sadly decided to move the team to the South Jordan, Daybreak area, and they will be demolishing the Bee Stadium. And she says it's such a wonderful opportunity. We're going to have 13 acres of land to develop however we want. And Gail Miller, this is an amazing announcement, is doing a public-private partnership with the city, and $150 million will go into revitalizing that piece of downtown Salt Lake City. And I'm afraid that those efforts are just not going to pay off unless we find more shelter space for the homeless. So let's get to the homeless part. She has a initiative called Safe Neighborhoods. And she says, and I quote, all the data in the world doesn't make a difference if you yourself become a victim of crime. We will be unrelenting to make our city safer. There were two kids killed in a crosswalk late at night. There was a 31-year-old killed at a crosswalk. 2 teenagers were killed on their way to a convenience store. These were all vehicular deaths. And a 30-year-old man was killed at a hit and run on his way to Trolley Square. 6 acts of vehicular violence is unconscionable. 19% of accidents were caused by left-hand turns. My goal is to have the safest streets in America, she says. So what's happening is more people than ever are being hit by cars in Salt Lake City, and she wants to figure out what to do to mitigate that. One of the big problems with trying to eliminate left-hand turns is, as we are going to be reporting on in the next few weeks, a major part of Sugar House is local and still locally owned and operated. And these business owners on this corridor on 21st South and Highland Drive all oppose the idea of putting a massive barrier in to prevent left-hand turns for those heading eastbound on 21st South, because then they won't be able to turn into their businesses. They are going to tear up 21st South. They are going to tear up Highland Drive. And these business owners in the heart of Sugar House are going to potentially be devastated by all this construction. And so we're going to be covering this throughout the year. The voice of local Utah is going to hear their voices, and we want you to support especially local Sugar House and my friend Bob Campbell and Chris Gordon or Howard at Fankhauser Jewelry. They need your support throughout this year because they're going to be under a lot of dirt and construction pressure for the next few months. So I don't think just saying we're going to ban left-hand turns like the mayor said is a good idea. I think they need to talk to business owners. The city needs to listen to business owners. So let's take a look at what else she had to say. At 3232, she says, "No issue challenged our city like the state and the nation's homeless crisis. There is no issue I spend more time on. No issue she says, there is no issue I spend more time on. We shoulder here in our capital city the vast majority of the state's humanitarian crisis on our own. It's beyond our capacity. Those who believe that homelessness should be solved by the mayor alone, that is backwards and a false notion. This city is doing more than ever to shelter the unhoused. We are doing more than ever to make partnerships with our state and counties and sister cities. This partnership is a true relationship that we need to learn to share. We brought in other cities. We opened more than 400 permanent and transitional housing units in just a few months. Together, we are finding the housing for those with severe mental illnesses who live in our street today. Housing is a complex issue to each individual and family that experiences." So let's pause it there. So the mayor obviously does not want to take the blame for the homeless crisis we find ourselves in, and she doesn't deserve all the blame. I'm not saying that. We've been very critical of the mayor's policy because the abatements are making the homeless stay on the streets. If you're a homeless person and you have all your crap with you, and you have a tent, and you have a sleeping bag and your stuff, and you can never leave that stuff, and you can never go and get a job, how are you going to get off the streets? How are you going to do it? It's impossible. You can't get off the streets if you are on the streets and you can't have your stuff be saved. So she did not say a word about a sanctioned campground. 1 year ago, there was a semi-sanctioned campground called, by different names, Camp Last Hope or Camp Pioneer, Fort Pioneer, and there were 150 homeless people there where they could keep their stuff safe. They had a system in place where there was a camp director, Stacy Johnson, and she had people looking out for each other. They monitored who was coming in and out of the camp. They had a warming house. They had a place where homeless people could recharge their cell phones. They had a place for people putting their trash, a dumpster, and they were getting donations of food and water all into one place, all in a sanctioned campground. The mayor is not talking about solving the problem. She's talking about put them in free housing. And we reported on in 2022 how free housing is actually a horrible solution. Just giving people this free apartment who are drug addicted, who have mental illness is not the solution. Putting people into very, very cheap heated tents where their stuff can stay safe so they can go get jobs, so they can get mentally healthy, so they can get off of their addictions, that is the answer. Very, very cheap, affordable housing. And so if I'm wrong, I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what better idea you might have. But Housing First has proven to be an utter disaster. Housing First is the concept that we could, if we just put people into houses, free housing, that will solve all the problems. The Magnolia Apartments that the mayor spearheaded with the Gail Miller and Pamela Atkinson and others, that has proven to be an utter disaster. Even the manager, the executive director of the Pioneer Park Coalition, spoke to the director of the Magnolia Apartments and said, the director of the Magnolia Apartments said to him, everybody here is on drugs. Everybody in those apartments. Lots of people here are mentally ill. They're getting no help. That is the problem. And the mayor went on to point out how the best thing happening for the homeless right now is that they are slowly moving forward with the tiny home village. The Other Side Village is starting to now do an environmental impact study. Why can't they just break ground? I mean, what is all of these hoops they gotta jump through? It's been now 2 years since that project was initiated, and we need tiny home villages all along the Wasatch Front. But I just don't get why is it taking so long. But I met Joseph Granny, the executive director of the Other Side Academy, as well as David Droscher at the event, and I want to have him back on to explain that, because the homeless, by and large, are on drugs, and many of them are mentally ill. They need to get into jobs. They need to work to get off their addictions and to become mentally healthy, not just get put into an apartment. So anyway, obviously I have my opinion about that. So here's more of what the mayor had to say. We have, she pointed out how we have 400 people in our, in the county, and 700 along the Wasatch Front who don't fit inside of the shelter system. And these people are outside. They're sleeping outside all the time. And these people, by and large, are indeed using drugs. I mean, I've talked to many of these homeless people, and when I go around Rio Grande and I interview them, the ones that talk sincerely to me are admitting, yes, I'm on drugs. We're all drug addicts. That's what we're doing out here. We're waiting to get our next fix. But if somebody would help us get off drugs, we would be into it. We would listen. We would try to get jobs. We would do it. Are they sincere? Some of them are, but some of them aren't. But we cannot have hundreds and hundreds of people out on the street impacting local businesses, making downtown much more difficult to make a living in, much more difficult to live in. And that is the number one most important issue that our city faces. The mayor, obviously, she spends a lot of time thinking about it. I would suggest, Mrs. Mayor, stop thinking about it. Go talk to the people on the street. Like, I don't know, if you had your security detail with you, you could go up to homeless people and say, hey, what can we do to help you get off the street? What can we do to get you into a job? And I think most of them are saying they don't want a free apartment. They just want a place to keep their things safe and to be able to get a job. I don't think most of them are insincere about that. All right, so let's get into what else did the mayor have to say. Bear with me, those of you who are live. Do we have anybody watching live? Mm-hmm. Yep. Sorry. If you have a comment on this, I'll read your comment, anybody watching live with us, because I'd love to hear what you have to say as well. Yes. I'm just finding where we are.
Got a few comments.
What do we got?
Yeah,
Yeah. You're going to read some comments.
All right. So the first comment we've got, all of our comments are from Dimed Out Comedy. He just is mentioning that it would be great, it'd be awesome if we could have Rocky on our show.
Rocky will probably be on our show sometime soon. I've talked to him.
He also says that the mayor is contracting the services out for abatement to a company called Advantage Services. I know someone who works for Advantage Services. Give us an insight on what's happening there.
Yeah, so we actually had on the program Rob Ferris, the CEO of Advantage Services. He was great to talk to. Certainly a guy with his heart in the right place, and Advantage Services is doing an awesome job. He has a really difficult job too, though. The major contractor of Advantage Services, like the easiest job you can get if you're on the streets as a homeless person, is actually cleaning up all the camps that the city goes in and abates. So if you want to go and clean up homeless camps as a homeless person, you can immediately go and get a job doing that. But again, the question is, if you've got a little camp set up, you've got to collapse that camp. You've got to somehow show up at like 9 a.m. in the morning, go work all day cleaning up homeless camps, and then go back and set up your tent and sleep on the streets. It just seems to me like that puts so many homeless people into something like an impossible situation. I can't imagine having to do that. But some of them do it, and some of them rise up the ranks in Advantage Services, and Rob Ferris says he has an amazing track record for getting people off the streets if they continue with the program. And I believe strongly, I've talked to a lot of people like this, if a person has the will to simply stop with the crack pipe, stop using drugs, and just decide they are going to turn around their lives, we have the mechanisms in place to do it. It's going to be extremely difficult at first because you will have to work at like an Amazon fulfillment center. That's another employer Advantage Services contracts with. You're not going to have a job that you love. But, folks like the Green Phoenix Farms, in the summertime, you can go actually work for them if you are clean. And I think the major component that holds up so many homeless people is their addiction. And how you overcome addiction, I think a big component of it is actually work. I mean, that's what we learned from the Other Side Academy mindset. You put people to work, you put yourself to work, you have a reason for waking up every morning, and I think you can do it. And it's just, but I think it requires a peer support network. It doesn't require, like there's a case shortage right now of homeless caseworkers of something like 200 people. They need to hire 200 people right now, today. They can't find them because caseworker burnout is so high, because these people are maybe have a degree in social work, but maybe they don't, and they're trying to work with people who are suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, just severe mental illness, and it's just not something that's easy to do. And so, yeah, Advantage Services is an awesome step in the right direction, as is Green Phoenix Farms, putting homeless people back to work. But addiction recovery, I believe, is like the Other Side model. You need a peer support group of a bunch of people getting off drugs together. Is there any other comments?
Yeah, just from the same Dimed Out company, he kind of mentioned similar to what I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me if I get this not exactly correct. But he basically mentions that there needs to be we need to differentiate between people who have a mentally ill, or even addicted to drugs versus generic homelessness.
Absolutely, yeah. What I find is most of the people who are mentally ill are also addicted to drugs, and those who are addicted to drugs often become mentally ill. So a lot of those people are in the same camp. And what the Pioneer Park Coalition wants to do, and I can't say this is the worst idea out there, they're thinking of turning the Oxbow jail into an intake center so all those people at least get checked into a program where they're working on their mental illness and or their addiction. The problem is there are nowhere near enough services available to get people who are mentally ill well, just by having a meeting with a psychiatrist every single day. It's just not going to happen that way. Really, the only mechanism I think that's viable is putting people to work and have them be working through their mental illness while they are in a work environment. So let's go back to more of what the mayor had to say. She said that Utah has the strongest economy for 15 years running. We have 400 in our county. This is going back to what I started on. 700 in our state who do not fit into the shelter system. That is more than, and she did these equivalencies. If we were talking about Idaho, that would be 1,000 people in Idaho. That would be equivalent to 170,000 people in California. So she says, we have turned a page from the finger pointing of our past. This is what our residents deserve. This is why Salt Lake City has partnered with the Other Side Village. Progress is moving forward, going to make sure you're breaking ground as soon as possible, and that they've approved the plan. And she also addressed the city council, who passed a measure for $600 million of urgently allocated money to start more projects to provide 400 more beds for permanent supportive housing units. Again, just putting homeless people into housing units has not proven to be successful at all. She says those funds are joined by the funds of the county and the state. Salt Lake City is investing more in affordable housing units than ever before. This fiscal year alone, she said, we are investing more than $30 million. At 3733 in her speech, in 2021 and 2022, we invested more than $15 million in affordable housing through our city's redevelopment agency. This year alone, we're investing more than $30 million. Salt Lake City didn't invest a dime in affordable housing before 2009. This year, the city is investing more than they did in all 10 years prior combined. So let's talk about affordable housing. We've covered that extensively in the past 20 episodes of the Utah Stories program. Why don't we have affordable housing in Utah? We brought on a developer who was trying to build $100,000 trailer park units in Centerfield, which is just outside of Gunnison. They need affordable housing extremely badly there. And the project was shut down by the mayor because they claimed there would not be enough water. The problem is NIMBYism. Nobody wants affordable housing in their backyard. Nobody. You can't find anybody along the entire Wasatch Front that is saying, yes, let's have affordable housing here in my neighborhood. Nobody wants it in their backyard, and so it's shot down time and time and time again. This past week, I went to another event. It was a group of investors, developers, who I thought would be like talking about how they manipulate the laws or how they go about, making things so difficult for affordable housing units because it would eat into their profits. No, that wasn't it at all. These were people who wanted to build affordable housing, who told me over and over again they're shot down by planning commissions, and the planning commissions simply just say no all the time. They're all across the Wasatch Front. You try to do anything affordable, and the planning commission, with all sorts of, they say, normal, everyday people, they're just like, oh, no, we can't possibly have that near our neighborhood. That would drive down our property values. So my contention is, if you came from an ancestry where maybe 3 generations ago your ancestors came here and they were poor, can you imagine if NIMBYism existed back then? Would they have ever gotten to the point where they could have afforded property? If that were the case back then, like, for example, my Armenian ancestors, my great-grandfather, his profession was ditch digger. That's what he did. He dug holes in the ground for people who needed holes in the ground. He would break his back day after day as a poor person so he could afford a house. Could you imagine if there was NIMBYism back then? I wouldn't be where I'm at today. My grandparents would have never gotten out of their little teeny tiny house they were raised in. And it's like, we can't be NIMBYs. We can't do that. We have to allow affordable housing along the Wasatch Front. We're killing the American dream for the future generations. These millennials and Gen Y and iGens still living in their parents' basements, a lot of them have just given up. A lot of them are like, I'm never going to get out of my dad's basement. It's absolutely impossible for me to afford with a social work job of ever having an apartment I can afford. And it's I just think it's this insidious mindset that poor people are bad or something. It's stratifying our society, and it's ruining the American dream. And I can't see any way of getting over it until we get over our NIMBYism. Yeah, let's hear some more comments.
All right, so forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but Black Levanter says that's convenient that Mayor Mendenhall, wants to stop the finger pointing now after demonizing those who believe in freedom and self-accountability. #no amnesty.
I would say that the finger pointing, it is like, they don't want to she doesn't want to be held accountable for any of her own decisions. And the only way I can accept that is by believing maybe she's not the one calling the shots. I actually proposed that idea to folks I knew there. I won't say because I don't want to get into the details or make them feel uncomfortable. But I talked to some people pretty well known at her event about the idea. Is she really calling the shots here? because it doesn't feel like that she is. Because what we are doing here in Salt Lake City is we're emulating the same policy that Los Angeles, California has tried and failed, that San Francisco, California has tried and failed, that Seattle has tried and failed, that Portland has tried. I mean, free houses for the homeless is the policy. That's the template that Mayor Mendenhall is following. That is a completely flawed, failed policy. Because if you don't address the underlying root causes of homelessness and you just simply put them into houses, as they do in California and Washington, what we see is homeless people line up to get the free housing. And they remain chronically homeless to get the housing, to qualify for the housing. Because if you're at the very bottom and you're drug addicted and your life is going down a spiral, what incentive do you really have to get back up, especially if you can't afford housing? You have a better incentive to keep spiraling downward and get that free housing. I mean, to me, it's economic and sociological common sense to see why so many people are choosing to be homeless. And I'm a little bit, I should say, not in the personal account. I'm in the personal accountability camp far more than the leftists who want to say, oh, these people, nobody wants to be homeless. Nobody chooses to be homeless. I don't think people choose to be homeless, but people do choose to pick up a crack pipe and smoke it. And I think there are people who can choose not to do that. Do we have any more comments?
Yeah. Again, Dimed Out Comedy says the amount of money that is being spent on those who are likely never to return into the workforce and become productive when so many other citizens don't receive any help or support. It's almost a zero-sum game.
Yep. I think that what we're approaching, if we continue on this path, is a tipping point, which I would refer you to Margaret Thatcher. She said, every leftist socialist idea sounds wonderful until you run out of other people's money. And that's exactly the tipping point we're heading toward. You can put up all of these people, and more people can justify their homelessness and their victim mindset, as long as you have plenty of other people's money to spend on them and to develop free housing and to get them enough food and shelter and warmth. And I absolutely believe the homeless people need food, shelter, and warmth, and they need a safe place to put all their stuff. We need to treat them all with compassion. We need to help all of them get off the streets. But the problem with the socialist victimhood mindset, as opposed to the empowerment mindset, let's empower these people to get jobs, is that we are going to run out of other people's money, and you are incentivizing homelessness. You're incentivizing people to live on the streets as long as we keep the policies in place that we're following right now. So, should I get back to her speech? Okay, so she says that with the RDA, they have more units than they've opened up in all the previous years combined, more affordable housing units. And she says this is just the beginning. We're thriving. We have Thriving in Place project. It's an anti-gentrification project. This has yielded 21 recommendations of their committee. The recommendation is to produce a family-sized $10 million project, a stable and affordable project. It's going to be wealth-building homes for 1,500 families. I would like to know the details of that plan. We'll look into that. But she says it's using President Biden's rescue plan funds. She says we'll build intergenerational stability and combat homelessness by creating stable, affordable, and wealth-generating housing for Salt Lake City residents. If that's true, that's awesome. I think that's probably the best thing she talked about. If people can actually get into housing that they can build equity in, where they can have a mortgage, but actual property they can own, I think that's critical, because once you own a piece of property, once you actually are building equity, which marries you to the constant improvement of the property, I think that's what makes America such a great country. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Europe and in Germany, and so many people can't afford to to own any property there, and it's just it creates a dependency upon the government. You really are relying so much on the government to provide your social welfare. And I think when we can liberate Americans by allowing them to more Americans to own more property, it creates this sense of self-reliance and independence, and it really harnesses that spirit of taking control of your destiny. And I think that's the spirit that my ancestors that I mentioned got, because when my great grandparents, my ditch digging great grandfather, started to be able to buy a property, he found another shack he was able to buy and rent to affordable immigrants. And they bought a bunch of properties, and they were just little shacks they were renting to immigrants. And then eventually those immigrants could buy their own shacks. And this all happened in Murray, Utah, where there were these farms all over the place there. I think about him a lot, because I think about my life as being hard sometimes. Sometimes we're really running out of money in our bank account, and we don't know what we're going to do. I'm sure everything we experience is nowhere near as tough as they had it. And all of the goodness that we experience in our lives today, we need to understand is thanks to those hard-working people who built this place up. We can't forget them. We owe our debt of gratitude to humanity. And so anyway, I went off on a little tangent there. Let's go back to what the mayor had to say. She said that the state of the city is ready. We have an incredible team of public servants, and they are here. Welcome to... And so she was basically praising her administration. She gave them an A. They achieved so many of their goals. And I, Salt Lake City, Utah, we have the best economy in the nation. Our homeless problem is nowhere near as severe as other states, but it's only getting much, much worse. And why don't we lead the nation in producing a homeless recovery program that surpasses the states of California and Washington, Nevada, where we're just giving more and more handouts to the homeless in terms of free housing, is not working. It's a failed policy. We need to have a real socioeconomic ladder that people can truly climb up and achieve things on their own. That's what gives a person a sense of dignity and self-worth, not government handouts which make people feel dependent and really crappy. Because if you just get things for free, you don't feel good about yourself. You don't feel a sense of accomplishment. You feel that way by doing things that are hard, getting help from people around you. All right, with that, we are going to take a break. When we get back, if we have time, it's 6 o'clock here now, we're going to get into what the state legislature is doing. There's a lot of bills that will affect your life, and we want to get into them. They want to be your big brother in bars. They want to spy on you when you're in bars. They want to ban transgender surgery for youth. We want to get into that a little bit, and they want to allow vouchers to allow parents to choose where their kids go to school and get up to $8,000 to go toward that school. Will that destroy public education as we know it? We're going to get into all these details. But first, Utah Stories' mission is to provide the voice for the voiceless. How you can help do that is subscribe to our print magazine. This is our issue. It's $36 for the entire year. And for $3 a month, we will send you the voice of local Utah and all of our awesome journalists. All of their great content will be delivered right to your door in print. And the reason why we're asking for your subscriptions is print costs have doubled since COVID. Printing this magazine on paper, we believe, is essential. We have experienced tech censorship. We don't know why, what we did that was controversial that led to that. But we cover the news, and we want to present to you the truth. And I think presenting the truth is become more rare in our society. It's become, doesn't matter if you want to tell the truth anymore. Some of the things you want to say, you just can't say. And self-censorship has become huge in our society. And we want to promote the First Amendment, as we said, and provide a voice for the voiceless. So if you want to support us, $36 for the entire year, that would be awesome. So with that, we will get back to you. We'll take a break, and we'll see you in a minute. Welcome to Utah Stories. I'm your host, Richard Marcosi, and by the way, I'm the editor and publisher of Utah Stories magazine. If you haven't seen this magazine before, I suggest you subscribe to it. It is $3 a month. We will send it to your home every single month. It is the voice of local Utah. It is a voice for the voiceless. There is nobody providing journalism like the journalism we provide. We talk to homeless people, we talk to farmers, we talk to business owners, we talk to people who are not represented in the local media. We provide them a voice. We really do that. And in this past 2 years, we have been doing that very strong. If you want to help us and support us, you can subscribe to our free digital newsletter. That's also awesome. It's a way to get every single week email about what it is we're doing in some of our stories, or you can subscribe to the magazine for $3 a month. All right, and let's get into this. The Utah State Legislature wants to be your big brother. They want to ban transgender surgery for youth, and they want to allow vouchers so that parents can choose where kids go to school. Will this destroy public education as we know it? We will get into the details of all of these major stories. And let's get started first with, should we try to save lives by allowing Big Brother into bars? This is House Bill 247. So a current Utah State Legislature bill wants to make it so that bar owners will be accountable even more if somebody overdrinks in their bar and they go out and kill somebody. So there's now even more support for people who have been killed in car accidents due to drunk drivers, especially if they've gone to bars. And so this is basically the idea that a video footage of every person who drinks an alcoholic beverage in Utah bars could save lives. And if this footage was released to the authorities so they could examine the footage, they can see exactly what the server did, maybe that could save lives. Maybe it could. But this would put an incredible burden on Utah bar owners, and it would certainly deter more customers from visiting Utah bars due to increased presence of the all-seeing eye of Big Brother, and it's an invasion of privacy. So in April, this is why this bill has started. In April 2022, 12-year-old Eli Mitchell was killed by a drunk driver in a crosswalk. The man who pled guilty spent 6 hours in a bar before Mitchell was hit. Could have these cameras saved young Mitchell? Maybe or maybe not. I mean, if you have a camera pointed at you while you're drinking in a bar, are you going to consume less alcohol, or are you going to be like, I now used to that camera pointing at me, I'll consume all I want? It's hard to say. But the old adage provided by Benjamin Franklin is, when a society is willing to pay for freedom for safety, they deserve neither. So I've debated that quote with people before. NPR argues that that's a pro-taxation argument. I argue that an invasive intrusion into our private lives, into the lives of business owners, under the auspices of safety, is a fallacy. We are not safe if the government is always watching, because absolute power corrupts absolutely. Winston Churchill said that. And if the government can mandate that all bar owners videotape their customers and must turn over all that footage to them, this certainly inhibits our ability to feel free in bars. Would this deter from over-intoxication? Maybe at bars, but what about homes? What about homes? The next step would be to video monitor anybody who consumes alcohol in their homes. Maybe the Utah State Legislature would mandate all bottles of whiskey and vodka contain cameras. And while you're drinking that bottle of whiskey or vodka, you have to keep that bottle in front of you, and they're going to keep an eye on you. The problem is that another step in government intrusion at the expense of liberty can always be justified if safety is always the top priority. We can make our speed limits all 5 miles per hour. Nobody would die in a car crash, right? But at some point, we need to draw the line clearly. Liberty matters more than safety. So with that, let's talk about the next bill they're considering. Should we allow transgender girls into women's sports? Now, this was a big issue in the last legislative session. So this is a really tricky subject to talk about because the NCAA has said, yes, you must allow transgender girls, biological boys, to compete against girls in athletics. So this segment, just by warning, contains some content that might be offensive or bothersome to viewers. So just that's a forewarning. But the basic question is, how do we contend with the notion that biological men are going into women's locker rooms, they're getting naked, they're stripping down, they're changing into their workout clothes right beside naked biological women? So, I mean, I can't imagine my daughter, me feeling okay, knowing my daughter, when she's a teenager, is going to go to a locker room and have a boy, a biological boy, transgender girl, undressing right next to her. I can't imagine my ever being okay with that, or any parent being okay with that. It's just not okay. Because boys, I mean, I remember very well when I was a boy in junior high school, and me and my friends, I mean, boys are horny. And I think that the problem is, what you're going to likely have a boy who says, you know what, today I identify as a girl. I just do. I feel like I'm a girl. And then he's going to go into a locker room and he's going to rape a girl. And I'm sorry to say that. That might sound very offensive, but I know for certain that's going to happen because it's already happened. They've allowed transgender girls into women's prisons, and women end up getting raped. So that might sound offensive to some of our listeners, but that is the truth, and we're here to report on the truth to you. So every day in a school locker room that a boy could enter into a girl's locker room under the auspices that they feel like a girl that day is just an insane idea. And so our Utah State Legislature wants to ban transgender girls from women's sports. I want to hear your comments on it. Where am I wrong? How is my logic flawed in this? If you speak the truth about this issue, and you're not afraid to speak the truth, I'm allowed to speak the truth. I'll tell you why. I'm a Gen Xer. Gen Xers, they just lay things out truthfully and honestly. They're not afraid of political speech. I never learned politically correct speech, so forgive me for that. Secondly, I'm an intersectional. I'm an Armenian immigrant, so you can't blame me because Armenians just speak their mind. That's like built into my DNA. And third, I'm a reporter. I'm paid to speak the truth. So I know I'm going to be labeled a transphobe or whatever, but that's just built in. I'm here to speak the truth to you, and that's what I'm doing. And so I know that what's going to happen next is that the trans community, the LGBTQ, they're going to tell everybody who speaks the truth on this matter that you are a transphobe, because that is their tactic. We need to all speak the truth on this issue. We can't lose women's sports. We can't let all of our little girls go into locker rooms with boys, and then when puberty hits, realize some of these girls are going to just get raped. That's not okay. I'm never going to be okay with that. But I want to understand the nuances. Obviously, there are the transgender idea that some people don't feel comfortable in their own bodies. I can begin to understand that. I can begin to understand that some people just don't feel comfortable in their own skin. But the other bill is banning the surgery or surgical procedures on minors to transition into a gender other than what they are. And so that's what's brought up tons of people to the Capitol to protest the transphobic nature of the Utah State Legislature, because they want to ban surgery, which is a chemical castration process in the in youth. And man, I just fail to find the logic of parents who want to encourage their children to transition while they are going through puberty. I don't get the logic, because you're never going to feel comfortable in your own skin until you're an adult. And to tell a child, encourage them to transition while they are still so young and still their brain is still developing, I just fail to understand the logic behind allowing youth to transition before they're adults. I mean, you have to be 21 to drink alcohol. I believe you should be at least 21 to transition your gender. But I believe there's a big lie here. There's a big lie being perpetuated. And that lie is that biological men, when they determine they identify as a woman, are just the same as biological women. That is a lie. No, they are not. And they cannot be allowed to destroy women's sports in the interest of inclusion. And Governor Spencer Cox supports trans athletes' initiatives to allow more biological boys into girls' locker rooms. Does he have any girls? He does have a girl, I believe. And I believe that is a very contentious issue, but I'd actually love to have on the program somebody who is a trans activist, and I'd like to talk to him about it. I'd like to hear both sides. Kara Birkeland is the state legislator who is all about preserving women's sports for only biological women. I'd love to hear her conversation with like Troy Williams from Equality Utah, because I'm not an expert. I obviously am biased. I have my point of view. I would like to hear others' points of view, because this is one of the most contentious cultural changing topics that we have to contend with at the Utah State Legislature. It's a massive topic, and I can't say I know everything there is to know about it, but I do have my opinion, which I just shared with you. All right, and then the third bill concerns the voucher bill. The public school voucher bill has been in almost every single session of the Utah State Legislature since I started covering it about 20 years ago. And every single session, there's a voucher bill. The National Education Association heavily funds efforts to squash those bills because they do not want to undermine public schools. They believe that any sort of voucher program would end up causing public schools to collapse. They believe that any sort of choice that parents might have to send their kids to a private school and be able to use their own taxpayer money to help fund that private school would destroy public education. But this bill is different. The way this bill works is they would automatically give every single teacher in Utah, throughout Utah, a $6,000 per year raise. And I think that's an awesome string attached, because the NEA wants to say this will defund education in Utah even more than it's already not funded enough. And if we give all the teachers a raise at the same time that this voucher bill is passed, and we empower parents to be able to choose where to send their kids, tell me how that's bad. Tell me how that's wrong. I'll tell you how it's wrong when I look at the nuances of the issue. There are schools throughout Salt Lake City that don't have enough students. There are a lot of schools that the enrollment numbers have plummeted, especially since COVID. A lot of parents have chosen to homeschool their kids, but they're still paying this massive amount of their property taxes to fund the school districts. We do that. We pay a massive amount of money to Granite School District. And I would love to take that money and say, you know what? I think my kid might be better at this private school than our public school. I think she's doing so awesome. She's a talented kid. She wants to excel. Why not allow her to go to this awesome private school and take my $8,000? That's all they're going to allow parents to take, and take it with me to a private school. I mean, and then what this is going to cause is the schools that don't have enough enrollment, they're going to close. We're going to have fewer public schools. And then that money that would have gone to that school is now going to be in the hands of parents to be able to choose where to send their kids. And so in Salt Lake City School District, you're going to see the most backlash by the teachers, by the administrators, actually, because Salt Lake City has so many days mandated for days off for kids. Even Granite School District does. I'm absolutely amazed how many days teachers have work days now. Like teacher work day is like all the time. And I remember there was a teacher work day maybe once per quarter, but we just had like 3 days of teacher work day. There's like UEA and then teacher work day and then I guess teacher recovery day. I don't even understand at all these days, but it's a huge pain in my ass because I got to take my kids to daycare. I got to pay for a daycare. There's no way I could work full time and have a job without daycare. And so you're telling me as Granite School District that your administrators need to determine all these teacher work days so parents have to pay a fortune to a daycare. If there weren't so many teacher work days and your job was just to simply also be sort of a daycare, you would save parents a fortune. And my kids, they like school more than their daycare. They like learning. They like the structure of learning. I would be willing to pay more money to the school if they would just watch my kids until I come home from school, from work. And so I would love to hear your comments on this because it's like a nuanced topic and everybody's in a different situation. I know there's all sorts of people out there with different kids' needs. But I don't see this as a negative. I see this as a major positive. And the one thing that really bothers me as well is right now it costs, studies have shown it costs about $180,000 to $300,000 to fire an incompetent public school teacher. And I had so many incompetent teachers in junior high and high school. I had some great teachers, but I had some absolutely incompetent teachers as well. And those bad teachers, you just can't fire them in public schools. You can't get rid of them. And you don't. And then the really great teachers, they should be earning way more money. They should be getting way more compensation, and they're not. So it's not under a meritocracy. We don't have a meritocratic system in place for teachers. And so the best and brightest are not going into the teaching profession. And we have, my wife has a cousin who works in Sweden. They pay their teachers over $100,000 a year. They get paid almost the equivalent of what really high-end professions get paid. And they have the very best public school system in the world in Sweden because they have the very best teachers. And we obviously don't have that here. I think teachers need to be paid more. I'd be happy to pay more for education if the kids were getting a great education and I didn't have to also pay for daycare. So that's what I have to think about that. Do we have any comments on this? All right. So I think that wraps it up. A lot of big, major, important issues in the city and in the state. And we would love to continue to provide the voice of local Utah. We're doing a sales blitz right now. We're getting awesome support from a lot of local businesses advertising in Utah Stories magazine. We sold a whole bunch more ads, and I'm super happy that the independent business owners of local Utah are stepping up and advertising in our magazine. We made it a lot more affordable. It starts at $150 a month. So if you own a business, you want to advertise in the pages of Utah Stories magazine, we have a little advertising button you can press at utahstories.com. You can learn all about that because we realize like the voice of local Utah, the most important voices are those who are building our economy, creating jobs, especially locally owned businesses, local jobs, because those kind of jobs are the jobs that people want. And so we went out and talked to so many small businesses this past month. It's been a blast. I've actually super enjoyed it. And we're really stoked to have on board a bunch of new advertisers who I'm going to share with you in future episodes. So with that, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to this channel, hit that like button, subscribe to the Voice of Local Utah by subscribing to our digital newsletter, or get a print subscription for $36 for the entire year. We'll send the Voice of Local Utah right to your mailbox every single month. And with that, have a great weekend. I'll see you next time.